In this video, I'm going to be trying out the O1 preview as well as the O1 mini model that just came out from OpenAI within Cursor. So at time of recording, Cursor doesn't yet have this available within their Pro tier and from OpenAI, and it's only available for those that have access to Tier 5 within OpenAI. So if you have Tier 5 access, you will be able to plug in your API key and get this working. There are some rough edges there from what I found, but that's one thing to be mindful of. Hopefully they will be rolling out this over the coming days and weeks to other tiers as well. What you can do is if you Command Shift P, you go to Cursor settings here, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to add a new model, and you can just grab the model string here. It's within the URL bar. You can also just grab it from their documentation page. If you just put in O1 preview, add that model, and then you'll have these checkboxes here where it will show you the different models that are turned on. Once you've added any model names, you will have to add your OpenAI API key. I have this simple Next.js application here. I thought I'd just play around with it a little bit and see what this new model can do. First, we're going to open up our composer, Command Shift I. Here's our composer view, and I'm just going to give it one of our files within our project. Let's just say the page. I'm going to say I want to make this page a landing page for a brand called Developers Digest. So we'll go ahead and submit that. And if you haven't used the composer view before, what's really cool with it is it will create net new files for you. It will understand the context of what you've passed in. If you select different files, it will understand what's within those files. And the one thing to note with this new model from OpenAI is it doesn't stream back. So you're just going to get the response back in full. The other thing to note is the O1 mini model does actually outperform the O1 preview model on some tasks for coding, and it is much cheaper as well as faster. I think this is probably going to be the model that a lot of developers gravitate towards. I'm going to go ahead and accept those changes. Now, if we look at our page here, we can see some of the changes. I'll go ahead and click Bun Dev. We'll start up our server here and we'll take a look at what it's made so far. Right off the bat, it did import a logo that I don't have. So let's just go ahead and get rid of this logo here. And for that sake, let's get rid of all of that image component as well. So here is the page that it made for us. Welcome to Developers Digest, your go-to resource for the latest developer news and tutorials. Learn more privacy policy, terms of service. All right, so let's go back to Cursor. Let's open up the composer again. And let's say I want to add 3 pages, a details page with YouTube thumbnails, a GitHub page with some recent projects, as well as a contact page. I also want to make this look much nicer. We'll go ahead and submit that. So I think there's definitely going to be some mixed feelings with the model. Even though it is more capable and competent, I think the fact that it doesn't stream back is going to be something that a lot of people might not like. But one anecdote that I've had from using Cursor and the composer is it does seem to be really quick. So I know originally they did have a deal with OpenAI, so I'm not sure if maybe they have faster endpoints or something to that effect, but it does seem to work pretty quick. The other thing to note is for these small little changes, it can feel like it does take a bit more time. If I'm just asking it for a small block of code to resolve something, it can take a little bit of time. One thing to note with this is we can see that this is a pretty obvious error that we got here that I haven't seen Sonnet 3.5 make. It did put an invalid comment within the JSX here. If I go ahead and look at this again, we have hidden buttons, we have our different pages, and our navigation, mind you, I didn't give it much instruction, but the navigation is on the bottom here. If I just click that, we see this page here. And it's a mediocre page. Now, mind you, again, I didn't really give it much detail here. And then there's our contact form. Creating UI components just after just a handful of prompts. I'm not super impressed. I think V0 is by far the best at generating UI components. This is really not great, but let's just continue on. So now, mind you, this also just came out and the Cursor team, they might be able to do some magic with this model to really get the best out of it. That's something to stay tuned to as well. I'm going to say I want the navigation at the top. Let's make the nav bar black with white text. Also, all of those pages look terrible. Let's add some color and make sure the nav is on each page. I'll reference the layout as well. So just to touch on the composer while we wait for it. The really cool thing with Composer is there's a ton of different things that you can select within here, whether it's folders, files, code. You can even index documentation that you commonly access as well, which is really handy. There's just a ton within here I encourage you to check out if you haven't already. All right, so we see that it made changes to a bunch of different things, edit to the layout, the pages. We'll go ahead and accept all of that. And here we go. Now we have another invalid comment. That seems to be a bit of an issue. But we do have a better looking page. So we see details, here are our thumbnails, we have our projects, we have our contact page. Now this seems to be pretty rudimentary. These aren't shad CNUI components or anything like that. Mind you, I didn't ask for that. So it might just be me not being used to like these sort of vanilla type of components. But what kills me is this comment at the top here. So I'm going to say, why navbar showing? Now, just to touch on the models themselves, if you are accessing it from the API, it is relatively expensive, especially if you're going to be using the O1 preview model. Now, O1 mini model, it is a fair bit cheaper, but it isn't one of the cheaper LLMs out there. This is definitely going to cost you a little bit of money if you're playing around with it. Here we go. Here's our pages again. I'm going to say, let's begin to really fill out these pages. Let's give them a lot of different elements and make all of them very professional. One thing with this model, when I'm using something like Composer, I'm not necessarily always wanting something to be like instantaneous, right? I have the expectation that it is going to take a little bit of time to go through and edit all of the changes, even if I'm using something like Claude 3.5 Sonnet. While all these fast inference providers like Grok, Sambanova, or Cerebras, those are really great for a ton of different applications. Oftentimes when I'm building out coding projects or I'm working with these tools quite heavily for different aspects, I generally try and use Claude 3.5 Sonnet or GPT-4o. And now likely also O1 mini, I'd expect is probably going to have a fair bit of time as well. Now, if time isn't an issue, it's definitely a good model, obviously at reasoning, as we can see from all of the benchmarks that they had. All right, so here we see it failed to compile. We're importing a component that needs use state. That's something as well that can be a little bit of a critique of the model, is it does have training data up to 2023. But in terms of Next.js, I find that it's not always great, the OpenAI models. I don't know if this is potentially, let's just go ahead and resolve our error here. We'll just use client at the top here. Next.js does change a fair bit, having these use client, use server. A lot changed, right? I've used React for over 5 years now. And Next.js, I do find that like year over year, things can change sometimes, right? For instance, how you'd used to reference pages and everything within a Next.js project, and then an app router came out. There's a bit of confusion at times amongst LLMs in terms of how to use Next.js, but this can be said about any modern framework, anyone that's innovating and whatnot. There can be these issues as well. All right, so we're getting a little bit closer. It's not perfect or anything, but if we play around with this just a little bit more, I'm going to say I don't want to use any images on any pages. Let's also add even more content to the internal pages. I'll submit that and I'll wait for it to load. Another thing to consider is while you're waiting for the response, maybe it's going to take a minute or 2 minutes or whatever to get your response back. You could, in the meantime, go ahead and leverage other LLMs to build out other aspects of your application, right? Or maybe build out the infrastructure pieces. Like here, it's saying implement the actual email sending logic using NodeMailer or an external service. You can branch out and start to do the other pieces of your application, getting it all ready if you're trying to be one of these AI builders and iterating quick and deploying your ideas. I find right now the biggest limitation is really just the ideas. It's not really the ability to execute. There's a ton of different tools where if you are a decent developer or even just a determined developer, you'll be able to ship things, like definitely if you're using these AI tools. So it did seem to run in terms of a little bit of an error here. I'm not sure if this is an endpoint error, maybe a potential cursor issue or something like that. But that's just a quick one. You can plug in both the O1 mini as well as O1 preview within this. When I use O1 preview, it's considerably longer than what you saw me demonstrate here. But I just wanted to give you an overall sense and first look at O1 as well as cursor. and how you can set it up from the API. Hopefully they really just start to roll this out to anyone with an API key, and hopefully also the Cursor team rolls this out to at least their pro paying members over the coming days and weeks. But otherwise, that's it for this video. If you found this video useful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Otherwise, until the next one.